Hello there, and welcome. Have you ever looked at some ancient artifact and just wondered, how do we know how old it is? Well, the answer isn't some kind of magic. It's actually a cosmic clock that nature built into life itself. So let's dive in and figure out how we can read this incredible story from our past.
Just take a look at this. This is Göbekli Tepe, a temple in Turkey that's so mind-bogglingly ancient, it predates Stonehenge by thousands of years. Archaeologists are pretty confident it's about 12,000 years old. But how? I mean, there are no written records, no dates stamped on the stones. The secret, it turns out, isn't in the stone at all, but in the organic stuff found nearby, and it all comes down to one very special kind of atom.
And this is the big idea for our whole explainer. I want you to imagine that you, me, the trees outside, every single living thing on this planet has a clock inside of it. A clock that starts ticking the very moment life ends and then just silently counts away the centuries. This isn't science fiction, folks. It's the science of carbon-14.
Okay, so to understand how we read this clock, we first have to see how it gets wound up in the first place. Where does this amazing time-telling atom even come from? Well, it all starts way up high above our heads in the upper atmosphere. You know, we're all made of carbon, right? Mostly. It's the stable kind, carbon-12, but there's this other, rarer version called carbon-14. It's got a couple of extra neutrons, which makes it heavier and, more importantly, unstable. And that little instability is the key. It makes carbon-14 radioactive, and it's being created constantly by these powerful forces from deep space.
So let's follow the wild journey of just one of these atoms. It all begins when a cosmic ray from outer space slams into our atmosphere. It hits a nitrogen atom and poof, it transforms that nitrogen into a brand new carbon-14 atom. This new radioactive carbon atom then grabs onto some oxygen, becoming radioactive carbon dioxide. And from there, it's all biology. Plants breathe it in. Animals eat those plants. And we eat the plants and the animals. It literally becomes a part of all of us.
All right, so all living things are constantly taking in this carbon-14. It gets into our bones, our skin, our tissues, everything. But when does it actually start telling time? Well, that's the crucial next step. See, while an organism is alive, it's in a perfect state of balance. It's always taking in new carbon-14 from food, which replaces the little bit of carbon-14 that's always decaying in its body. But the very second that organism dies, that intake stops cold. No more eating, no more breathing. The decay, however, keeps on going. And that is when the clock officially starts ticking.
So what is this ticking I keep talking about? It's a process called radioactive decay. That unstable carbon-14 atom, well, it doesn't want to be unstable forever. Over a very long time, it sorts itself out by releasing a tiny particle and turning back into what it started as, a nice, stable nitrogen-14 atom. Every single time that happens, that's one tick of the clock.
Now, here's the magic. That ticking isn't random. It happens at an incredibly precise and predictable rate, and it's all governed by one very important number. This number is the key that unlocks the past. 5,730 years. It's the constant, the metronome, for our cosmic clock.
So what is that number? Well, it's what scientists call the half-life of carbon-14. And this is a fundamental law of physics. It means that if you have a bunch of C14 atoms in exactly 5,730 years, half of them, not more, not less, will have decayed back into nitrogen. It is incredibly reliable.
You can see exactly how this works on the chart. At the moment of death, you've got 100% of your carbon-14. You wait one half-life, that's 5,730 years, and boom, only 50% is left. Wait another half-life for a total of 11,460 years, and that amount gets cut in half again, down to 25%. It's this perfect, predictable downward curve that makes the whole clock work.
All right, so we've got the theory down. A clock starts at death, ticks predictably with a known half-life. But how do scientists in a lab actually read the time on some tiny ancient fragment of bone or wood? Basically, what they do is take that ancient sample and measure the ratio of the stable carbon-12 to whatever radioactive carbon-14 is left. Then, they compare that ratio to the ratio we find in living things today. The less carbon-14 they find, well, the longer that clock has been ticking.
And today's technology for this is just wow. There's a technique called accelerator mass spectrometry, or AMS, that takes this to a whole other level.
They basically fire atoms from the sample into a particle accelerator. A giant magnet then separates the atoms by weight, so the lighter carbon-12 atoms get bent away, while the heavier carbon-14 atoms fly straight to a detector. It lets scientists literally count the remaining atoms one by one. It's how we can date incredibly small samples with amazing precision.
But there's a catch. There's always a catch, right? There's a little complication in our otherwise perfect clock. The whole system kind of assumes that the amount of carbon-14 being created in the atmosphere has always been constant. But what if it hasn't? What if things like solar flares or shifts in the Earth's magnetic field changed how much C14 was in the air over thousands of years? That would throw the whole clock off.
For a long time, this was a real puzzle. But then scientists found a totally elegant solution by using a different kind of natural record keeper, the rings of ancient trees, which give us this perfect, year-by-year diary of the past.
This process is called calibration. It's brilliant. Scientists can take a tree with thousands of rings, where they can count back to an exact year. Then, they measure the carbon-14 in that specific ring. By doing this over and over with thousands of rings from ancient trees, they've built this master calibration curve. It's like having a historical cheat sheet that lets them fine-tune the cosmic clock and make their dates incredibly accurate.
So this tool is obviously incredibly powerful. But like any tool, it has its strengths and it has its limits. And it's super important to understand what the carbon-14 clock can tell us and what it simply can't.
First up, what it can date. The simple rule is this: if it was once alive and it's made of carbon, you can probably date it. That means things like wood from an old building, bones from a skeleton, fabric from a mummy's wrapping, seeds found in a pot, a leather shoe, or even the paper from an ancient scroll.
And that brings us to the flip side, what it can't date. The C14 method is completely useless for anything inorganic, things that were never living in the first place. You can't date the stones from a pyramid, a metal sword, or a piece of pottery. And why? Well, because they were never breathing in carbon dioxide, so their clocks were never even wound to begin with.
And there's one more crucial limit. The clock eventually runs down. There is a hard upper limit to how far back in time this method can see, and that limit is right around 50,000 years.
So why 50,000 years? Well, after that much time, that's almost 9 half-lives. The amount of carbon-14 has been cut in half so many times that what's left is just impossibly small. At a certain point, there are just too few atoms left to measure reliably. The clock's ticking just becomes too faint to hear anymore.
But let's be clear, within that 50,000-year window, this one discovery has been nothing short of revolutionary. It transformed archaeology from a field of educated guesses into a hard science. Timelines that were fuzzy suddenly became sharp and clear. Thanks to carbon-14, we've mapped human migrations, we've understood ancient civilizations, and we've dated incredible places like Göbekli Tepe, completely rewriting the story of our own past.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. Carbon-14 opened this amazing window into our more recent past. But there are other radioactive clocks, ones with much, much longer half-lives, that let us date the Earth itself. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other cosmic clocks are still out there, ticking away in nature, holding on to secrets that are just waiting for us to figure out how to read them?